hold up that deeply sourced reporting over a decade on the part of Donald Trump next to manipulated data, specifically about those injured in the war in Iran?
Well, it seems especially dishonest, Nicole, because he is such a vain man. He's concerned with his own looks to the extreme and how he looks. And yet these soldiers, the individuals who are wounded in actions, who suffered burns or amputations, who have to go through, as say, a 19-year-old when they suffer those injuries, the rest of their life adapting to it, and they don't have a choice. That makes it especially vile, in my view. These are some of the soldiers. I was looking at the casualty figures. There were 4,400 killed in action in Iraq, in Iraqi freedom. There were 31,000 wounded in action on that same data list. On the list that came out that he updated, that the President's, the Department of Defense updated and opened this new category, there were 4 killed and not 100 wounded, which was claimed. I think it was 140 wounded. So even in that, what Undersecretary for Public Affairs Parnell said was we only had about 100 wounded in action. It actually was 140. So that was a new data point too. And I got to tell you, these aren't just numbers. These are individuals. They are family members who care for them. There are buddies who understand when they leave the battlefield. There are people who care for these individuals. And the American people, more than anything else, when we're talking about combat and taking our country to war, they want transparency and truth. And when we lose that, that could be, I'm just spitballing here, but that could be the reason why no one is supporting this war and no one is supporting the president as he tries to fight it. The polling data is off the chart, and I'm not usually one that goes to polling data, but you can understand when you don't know what the truth is, when the American people and the Congress don't know what's happening, and when there is an obvious manipulation of figures and data points, you can understand why the loss of integrity creates this kind of chasm between the American public and the President of the United States and his administration.
Claire McCaskill, the disapproval of the war is uniquely bipartisan in a moment we are told over and over again is deeply polarized. The rebukes for this manipulation of data equally bipartisan. Let me read you what Republican Congressman Thomas Massey wrote on Twitter. Quote, "Let me explain this absurd ruse. The Pentagon is pretending there have been 2 Iran wars separated by a brief ceasefire. The reality, by going more than 90 days without congressional authorization, the Secretary of War is breaking the law and must be held accountable." What does that mean to accuse Pete Hegseth of crimes and say that he has to be held accountable? Is that impeachment that he's calling for?
Well, he hasn't said that word, but I think Massey would be on board with that. I don't know how many other Republicans were. What I've mostly seen are Republicans who know better, being big cowards, especially the senators on the Armed Services Committee. And let me say something that, Mark, that General Hertling did not say. I think people need to understand, why do they do it? Well, as someone who was honored to sit on the Armed Services Committee and have a front row seat to the military ethos and leadership in the United States of America, it was awe-inspiring. And one of the reasons they do it is because they love their country, they want to serve, and they believe deep down in their bones that if they are wounded or lose their life, they will receive the respect of the commander-in-chief and government leaders and hopefully most Americans. And playing games with data to make yourself look better, government data, that's one thing. But playing with numbers, playing with data that impact those who have said, "Take me, I'm willing to die," that is a whole nother level of sin. And not only does that impact how we see the war, but it also impacts our military in terms of their morale, in terms of how they view their military leadership. If Pete Hegseth thinks doing push-ups out in front of some base is the way to get the military all jazzed up and happy, he doesn't understand rule one about Americans' military, and that is, it is all about leaving no one behind, taking care of one another, and most of all, showing respect for our wounded and those who pay the ultimate price. And what this Pentagon is showing right now is they could give two hoots about that. They don't care about respecting the people who have been injured and have lost their lives. They're more worried about fashioning a way that nobody can figure out how badly they are botching what they're trying to do. In fact, how badly they're botching whatever they're trying to do, because none of us are really sure what they're even trying to accomplish. It is so bad. Every time I think they've gotten as bad as they can get at the Pentagon, it gets worse.
Claire, the American people either have consumed enough information to render the same judgment, or they just intuit that the fact that Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth don't even say the same thing within the same news cycle means that this is not a clearly sort of thought out operation. If they can't in the fifth month come up with a similar song sheet. Let me just share some of the polling. This is from the CBS YouGov poll. This is how the Daily Beast reports it. 2/3, 63% of Americans believe the conflict is going badly for the United States of America. 76%, almost 80% of Americans believe that it has been harder than Donald Trump expected. So almost 80% of Americans now think that Trump was duped or Trump was incompetently headstrong in starting a war. Almost 80% believe it's been harder than Trump expected, and 60% believe that the president is essentially lying, that Donald Trump makes the situation in Iran sound better than it is. Where do you go from there, Claire?
That's a good question. What really is scary about this is that he went into this conflict without listening to his experts. I promise you there were people in the military, maybe not Pete Hegseth, but there were other people in the military that were urging caution, explaining to him that this is not going in and yanking a guy out of Venezuela. This is a whole nother very complicated deal to do unless you're committing to full-out war with ground troops. He thought he could just do this and, he would be, oh, look how cool our bombers are. Look how we can bomb them, and they're going to fold just like what happened in Venezuela. Instead, we have a more extreme leadership. We have the Strait of Hormuz closed when it was open. We now have another choke point in terms of oil. We have no idea what's going on with the uranium. We have no deal on nuclear power or nuclear enrichment. So this is a mess created by an ego that refuses to listen to people who know more about it than he does. And shame on them, and shame on the people sitting in the room that didn't try harder to stop him, especially those United States senators that should have been doing more to say, whoa, 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 you're not going to be able to go in and out. This won't happen that way.
There's a mystery as well to deal with. Dermot Hurley, you write about it. I'll give a little tease ahead of the break. After 13 consecutive nights of American bombing of Iran, the 14th night was quiet, ... We'll read the rest of it on the other side of the break. We'll also bring into our conversation the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. We'll put that question to him. We'll also ask him about efforts Donald Trump.
It is extremely disrespectful to the public in general and to the soldiers in being disloyal in telling the truth as far as transparency with the numbers, whether or not like he was talking about a while ago, not only did they want to document these things and make it transparent of them being injured, but severely injured or moderately injured. They even kept up with them whenever they left the area that they was fighting and come to a major hospital over here in America. That way, their statistics was as accurate as they possibly could. And whenever you have somebody that's deliberately squandering on those statistics, whenever they're botching up by putting whatever out on there, it actually speaks volumes about how the chief and commander actually feels about his armed force men and women, that he's willing to do something like that. You know, and as I was talking, I was thinking to myself, well, if you go back into the 1991 ordeal with Desert Storm and Desert Shield, the media had such of a foreplay in what was going to happen and when it was going to happen, due to the fact that our military advisors over here would make that known publicly, and then they would scatter it all over, they broadcast it all over the media, and the next thing you know, our enemies would know that we're fixing to attack over here in this area, we're going to move back over here in this area, we're going to do this over here in this area. And what even made it worse was, according to the rule game, the American soldier was not to never engage in shooting unless shot upon, even though we was the ones that was pursuing into this war front back then and even now. In other words, playing political chess with people's lives. I told you all along that the statistics did not lie. As much material as the founder of the Jesus Christ Jubilees Windmill Ministries missions has put out, and get back zero response, speaks volumes about how that the American people either think that they're vulnerable to the degree that they won't have to give an account towards their patriotism, or they just don't care, because the whole time this ministry that God has given me to help to orchestrate has supported global, economical, political, spiritual, morally, mentally, emotionally, peace here upon to the earth, and nobody supports it. Why else would I not say the things that I say whenever I say these people over here are full of themselves in saying one thing out of one side of their mouths, but in reality doing something completely different? And that's what started in the 90s after the 9 tapes circulated to the White House in 1988. That's what got America started on the wrong foot, pertaining to saying one thing but doing just the very opposite. That's one of the things that pissed a bunch of people off whenever they did go over there and do what they done, that in return retaliated in the form of 9/11.
Who we know only wants news and information that he wants to hear, so much so that someone prints out positive social media posts for him. Dear friend of this program and the former Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Sue Gordon, shared her concerns about this as the Iran war rages on. Take a listen to what she told me on the latest episode of The Best People.
If he is believable that no one told him that the Strait of Hormuz would be closed, it is almost beyond imagining how intelligence has value and our system can work if the person at the top of it, who has the most power, feels the least responsibility.
Has he broken intelligence?
I think it is in all our institutions, and intelligence is no different. We've lost so much talent. There's so much stress inside the system that I think it's probably not as robust as it was, but the women and men that are still there are fighting really hard and pulling really hard. It does matter whether intelligence is able to remember that its only job is to see what is rather than what is preferred, and to be willing to be massively inconvenient in the retelling of that. And if that doesn't happen, then I would say intelligence has lost its value, because that's its role.
Joining our coverage, Democratic Congressman from Connecticut.
It's lost its integrity. In other words, you don't know what he's saying, if it's truthful or not. The government itself has lost its integrity. That's sad. That's really scary. And you wonder how come you're having these idiots do what they're doing out here? That's why. They feel like that they've been portrayed, and in a lot of ways they have been, due to the fact of us being trillions of dollars in debt, and due to the fact that our own system cannot even protect itself, much less protect others that we claim is our allies overseas.
Casualties going up would further make this war politically unpalatable. It already is, but obviously additional casualties makes it more so. And so they try to, funky sleight of hand to suggest that that they were lower than they in fact were. And the thing they didn't predict is just how hideous Americans would view this. I don't care how committed you are to the MAGA movement and to the notion that the president is always right. When you see the photo of the 19-year-old young woman who was killed, and you think that this White House is using her death or trying to hide her death for political purposes, that is, I think most Americans would tell you, well beyond the pale. With respect to intelligence, you got it from Sue Gordon right there. There aren't many people as thoughtful and as competent about the intelligence community as Sue Gordon. And she's right. She's right. I mean, two things to say about it. We've lost real talent. The intelligence community is made up of thousands of enormously patriotic, very competent people, but they're people, right? So when a guy like Bill Pulte or Tulsi Gabbard or whoever else makes it very clear what they want, people bend. People have a sense for incentives. And the problem with that, and it hasn't come up, but the problem with that, you and I are both old enough to remember what happens when the intelligence community does what the president wants. You'll remember George Tenet, then director of the CIA, promising George W. Bush that the case for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was, to quote him, a slam dunk. Thousands of dead Americans later and no weapons of mass destruction.
There you go.
You have a sense for how absolutely essential it is that the intelligence community never be dominated or even influenced by what the desires of the president may be.
That's right.
Let me read you something General Hertling wrote and ask you if you have any leads that you can share with us publicly. She writes this in the Bulwark. Why did Trump stop the bombing? Quote, after 13 consecutive nights of American bombing of Iran, the 14th night was quiet. That silence has generated almost as much speculation as the strikes themselves. The New York Times reported that Trump ordered the halt out of concern that the U.S. is running dangerously low on missile interceptors. But that concern doesn't preclude other reasons for pausing the strikes. Are nascent diplomatic efforts indicating a path beyond military operations? Did America's regional partners quietly urge restraint? Or did the president's advisors conclude that continued bombing was no longer advancing America's strategic objectives? We may not know the answers for months, perhaps years, but it may be getting through to the administration that the strategy of airstrikes it has pursued against Iran for 5 months isn't advancing political objectives. I guess 2 questions for you. 1, do you know why the bombing stopped after 13 nights? And 2, do you have any information about what a lot of reporting suggests is absolutely true, and that is our low stockpiles of munitions?
Yeah. I mean, without being too specific, the pause in the bombing is reflective of the strategic box that the president has gotten himself into, and in which there's no clear exit. And in my analysis and opinion, I would tell you that it's driven by 3 things in order of importance. Number 1, the president has a feel for his own numbers and his own politics, right? And he understands that when oil is at $100 a barrel, his numbers are headed south, because that means gasoline is $1.50 more than it was 4 months ago for every single American. And he understands the political toxicity of that. Secondarily, and I'm not sure how much the president thinks about this, but I do assume that behind closed doors, his military advisors are telling him that we are running very, very low of those defensive weapons that we need, that we'd love to send to Ukraine, that we'd absolutely need in the event of a conflict in the Indo-Pacific. And then thirdly, imagine what the rest of the world is saying. Now, I don't know that Donald Trump cares about the rest of the world. I think he probably listens to Saudi Arabia, who are having their cargo ships attacked. But Asia right now is in absolute economic crisis. So I have to believe that there are any number of foreign countries who are saying our economy is about to enter into a depression because of this war. So cool it and make a deal.
General Hertling, you're the author of those words. Your analysis of why the bombing stopped?
Yeah, if I can just generate some more thought about this. Having been a member of the Joint Staff a long time ago, I've sat around in meetings with the J1 through the J8. Now, America doesn't know what those people are, but each one of those J sections, 1 through 8, gives the chairman of the Joint Chiefs information. And the information has everything to do with either personnel, intelligence, operations, what foreign nations are doing, what the logistics status is like, or what the base status is like. And I would suggest that over the last 5 months, every one of those Joint Staff officers, all of them either 2 or 3 stars, are telling the chairman, you've got to tell the president this is the current status. Unfortunately, when the chairman goes to the White House, he's part of a group of people that are all whispering in the president's ear. And I would suggest that General Kane probably is sharing the information he's getting from his staff. But when you're surrounded by a bunch of other people who just tell the president what he wants to hear,
mixed messaging,
then it's problematic. You just had Sue Gordon on, and she's a hero to many military people because she was a great intelligence person.
Absolutely.
But there was also a director of defense intelligence, a guy by the name of Lieutenant General Jeff Cruz, who was fired just because he said that the nuclear capability of Iran were not obliterated, or his analysts couldn't conclude that just yet, the day after the bombing. So yeah, it puts a chill on the individuals who are trying to talk to the president and give him factual data. But as you just said, Nicole, he's got his own calculations. Unfortunately, most of his gut feel is not based on either fact or logic or validated truth. And that's the problem. He's spitballing it.
Congressman Jim Himes, General Mark Hertling, and Claire McCaskill, thank you so much for being part of our coverage today. We played a little bit of my latest interview for the...
Spitballing, he's crawfishing because he knows he's done taking the bait in thinking that there was uprisings happening and it was time to go up against the regime because the people was going up against the regime. But as soon as America started going up against the regime, what happened to the people? The people rebonded and they come together, but they come together in the form of supporting the same regime. So these telltale signs that people are trying to gauge all this off of, they need to learn to start looking at a different recourse, because you can look at the Afghanistan war that we spent so much time in and left unappropriately, the way that we left out of there, basically just leaving them people high and dry, thinking that the time and the effort, the sacrifices that was made in those 10 years, that we've done a heroic good thing in trying to dismantle that regime. That way those people would have a sense of a new way of life. And then less than 11 days later, what did the people do? They retaliated and they surrendered to the very people that we had taught them to go up against. Once more, it blowed up in our faces. This is blowing up in our faces. But rather than tell the public that, well, we're just going to tell part of the truth and not the whole truth. Well, part of the truth and not the whole truth is actually lying, because you're not telling the whole truth. That's one of the stipulations that we stand in court, pretending to do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. They don't want to hear just bits and pieces of what happened and how come it happened. They want to hear the whole thing. That way they can make an accurate assessment of who was at fault here. It's really pissy poor judgment upon to the leadership of our military that wants to misguide, be half-truthful, non-truthful, pertaining to the statistics. During the Civil War, and you've heard me say this before in some of my other material, it was absolutely crucial that the men and women that had to sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice for, that they wanted their loved ones back home to know that they didn't make it, and that basically where their bodies was going to be buried at. That way it would help to bring closure to the families. Well, little Jim didn't make it. We got a letter back from the military saying that over in this field in Pennsylvania, over in this field in Virginia, or over in this field in Tennessee, he was killed. That meant everything in the world to the families back home. That way they could move on with their lives, and it wasn't second guessing of whether or not little Jim or whoever was going to come back home or not. I did see a movie that touched my heart a long time ago, and whenever I say a long time ago, I was only a teenager or possibly even less than that, of a military Civil War movie. And there towards the last, whenever they thought that, you know, things was calming down and everybody had died, and they'd done already put to rest that everybody had died, that little Joe come walking into the church building Sunday morning, that basically put everybody in tears. I wish that I would have known what the name of that movie was, because that particular scene was a very dramatic scene. And not only was it dramatic because of that particular event in the movie, but there ain't no telling how many other families had done already said, you know what, there ain't no need of thinking that Johnny or Tony or Jim or whatever is gonna return back, because we ain't heard nothing from them in the past 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden, Johnny or little Jim or whoever comes back into their lives. That's ecstatic when that happens. That's absolutely ecstatic in knowing that your prayers finally touched the throne room of God, and that the Lord did have his protected hand upon that particular person's life. Now, I'm sure that it didn't happen that often, but I'm pretty sure that there was many cases like that, to where they'd done already given up on their loved ones by thinking that they was dead, and then a few years later they come walking into the door. It is crucial, it is absolutely essentially crucial, that our government is clear-minded and honest, protecting the transparency, and telling the people the truth. Not half of the truth, not part of the truth, but the whole truth. It is essential if you're going to maintain any type of integrity of the reason why that you went to war over there to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, first, it's great to see you, Nicole. I think it's important for us to ask ourselves the question, what is the ideological motivation for this? There's a sense in which Donald Trump and the folk who support him, they want to be white supremacists without judgment. They want to be able to hold this ideology that is in so many ways motivating the assault on DEI, the assault on affirmative action, the assault on collecting demographic data by the EEOC and the like. They don't want history to offer resources to judge them. And so I think we need to understand this as part and parcel of the second lost cause. And that involved an assault on what we know and how we know in order to justify a particular racial regime.
Maya, let me read a little bit more about what they're trying to do here. The executive order of the American Historical Association said the plan to station government material outside the museum was, quote, an absolute affront to the professionals who work in the building. and likened the signage to issuing a trigger warning to visitors before they encounter exhibits such as the Star-Spangled Banner. Her deepest worry, she said, was that the campaign would erode public trust in an institution that teachers and researchers have relied on for more than 150
There
years.
you go, public trust.
The White House is essentially telling the American public not to trust the Smithsonian Institution.
Yeah.
I mean, the racism is so in your face, but the effort to sow distrust in that which is demonstrably true is so dangerous. And now extending it to our most beloved cultural institution feels like a real acceleration.
It is acceleration.
Well, it's absolutely an acceleration. I agree with Eddie on the work this is trying to do. And let's put a fine point on it. I mean, this is a culmination from this administration in, frankly, complaining about what courses are being taught in colleges and universities, sending a dear colleague letter to teachers, even in the K through 12 level of education, literally trying to control what is taught and what people can learn. So it is had its sights also on the Smithsonian. We're just talking about people who are trying to do their jobs in teaching history and all its complexity. And as we know, teaching history, to Eddie's point, this is really about controlling of how we think moving forward, not what happened in the past. We all know what happened in the past. Whitewashing it is not helpful to anyone unless what you're trying to do is take control of institutions that are helping us all understand how not to repeat the mistakes and the sins of the past. Because remember that the Trump administration, the White House, Donald Trump personally does not control the Smithsonian's institutions. So this is another example of using, and I would argue abusing power to undermine cultural institutions that are here to serve a conversation we're supposed to have in this country and supposed to have repeatedly as we continue to author our future and try to figure out how we prevent the past from being our future. And that's what's at stake.
That's exactly what's at stake.
The consequences we don't expect Trump to be moved by, but the sort of stupidity in terms of it being the low-hanging fruit for authoritarians is something that Adam Kinzinger, former Republican member of Congress,
In other words, lessons will be repeated until learned. Well, how are you going to learn the lesson if you don't know what the results was? If the people giving out the information is giving out false information.
Museums preserve documents and objects that may contradict what the government says. Scholars examine official claims and publish evidence. Reporters record what politicians say, making it harder for them to deny it later. Trump's attacks on cultural institutions is not a new strategy. Authoritarian leaders often begin by taking control of universities, museums, and the press. In 1931, Mussolini required Italian university professors to swear loyalty to the fascist regime. Nazi officials purged cultural institutions, removed thousands of works they labeled degenerate from German museums, and dictated who could work in art, film, music, and publishing. Viktor Orban's government gained influence over much of Hungary's media and transferred universities to foundations headed by political allies. Again, this isn't some woke left-wing journalist making those points. This is former conservative Republican Adam Kinzinger making the point. And this is, I think, just important to put out there as undeniable factual history of the practices of authoritarians. Eddie, I wonder your thoughts about how much progress Donald Trump has tragically made in pursuing these three areas: universities, the deals to capitulate and pay him off, the press, sitting there and humiliating them and while they're all sitting in the room Friday night, and this signage outside the Smithsonian.
Oh my God, Nicole, we're there. I mean, he's been extraordinarily successful. American higher education has been devastated by this.
Extortion.
You can see how it's functioning. You can see the way it's changing admissions calculus. It's changing what's being taught in the classroom.
Exactly.
And these folk aren't interested in history. They're interested in heritage. And we can call it stupid, but we need to be clear. This is driven by Claremont Institute folk. This has underneath it a kind of nationalist ideology about what constitutes a sovereign nation, about what makes us American. These people believe that this is a white republic. We talked about this not too long ago. They believe it, and they want a history to sanction it. And so I think it's easy for us to look elsewhere to look to Mussolini, to look to Hitler, to look to Orban. This is homegrown, Nicole.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is homegrown.
Yeah, that's
This
right.
is the story we told at the end of the 19th century.
That's
This is
right.
the story that produced, that educated the children that turned out to be the violent resistors to the civil rights movement.
Yep.
This is homegrown. And part of what they're trying to do is to resist those resources that will allow us to account for them, to hold them accountable by way of history. And then the last point I would make about this is I think it's absolutely at the heart of this. These people want to put people like me and Maya in our place. And once again, we got to raise our babies in this shit, Nicole.
That's right.
Once again. I'm sorry, Maya.
Well, Teddy is speaking, Eddie is speaking truth. My point was, we won't be silent, and we're not being silent, but this is linking to Eddie's really powerful and important point. If you wonder why we should be concerned about the signage outside the Smithsonian, remember this started with the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which were principles and the premise of the first Reconstruction when we won a civil war.
Our Northern
that said we're all
Star.
citizens, and to the second Reconstruction, which was when we won things like voting rights and the ability to get a fair opportunity to get a job and be deemed qualified and not discriminated in education. But the reason I link these things is because the Supreme Court just recently said you could do partisan mapping to reduce the political power of Black people or the political power of Latinos or Asians or any communities of color, acknowledging race discrimination that happened in mapping in Alabama just recently, gave it a pass. And the way they gave it a pass was by saying white people were harmed. This is all about a narrative that tries to suggest, rather than we all benefit from having a constitutional and inclusive society that is still a nation we have to work toward, remembering why, remembering how, and remembering what progress we've made and the progress we haven't, is really an effort at taking away what we've won, taking us backward, to Eddie's point. But it isn't only going to hurt Black people. It isn't only going to hurt Latinos. It's already hurting other people, and that is the point of tyranny. Find scapegoats and use it to harm the Republic.
Maya and Eddie, I need you guys to stick around a little bit longer. We'll keep this going. I also want to tell you about news that basketball superstar LeBron James has decided to join the 76ers. It was met with jubilation in Philadelphia, but one person had sour grapes about it. His name is Donald. He attacked the sport's all-time scoring leader and superstar in a way only he can.
See, in reality, this isn't just a thorny issue pertaining to our integrity, pertaining to being truthful to the people. But this is what gives a sense of loyalty to our sovereignty, of the authenticity of, let's depend upon our chief and commander and the government officials in telling the truth, being honest with us. Are we not worth or valued to the point that you can at least be honest with our families and with the public in telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God. Whenever it reaches the point that the truth is no longer vital or the truth is no longer essential, then we have missed the mark. Because the Bible says that the truth will set you free. But as the truth is setting some people free, it'll probably cause some people a life without parole, or possibly even an execution based upon the truth. Was you guilty? What was your intent? Did you mean to do this? You know? I just find it to be appalling, absolutely appalling to think that any president, and especially in the 21st century, as much technology we have, we got a daggone telephone almost in everybody's hand now. I mean, you can't hardly move without somebody registering or documenting you or recording you or seeing you somewhere. It's almost impossible to get out of your house in America. Now, maybe if you live down in South America somewhere, down in the rainforest somewhere, and you was in a completely different environment, maybe you could still live your life the way that they did 100 years ago, and you wouldn't have to worry about somebody looking over your shoulder. But not today. Not today. Even my cousin, me and him got into kind of like a debate or whatever you want to call it, an argument, a digital text argument, and he didn't realize that the things that he was texting back to me, not only could I look at it, but the whole world can look at it. Since this new modern digital era has come into play, people needs to accept the facts of reality of where we are today. Because what you say, how you say it, where you're at, when you say it, etc., could come back and bite you. Could come back and cause devastation into your life of some form or fashion. We no longer live in the same world. It's what we did even going back before 9/11. Before 9/11, you get to seeing people, big crowds walking around, and none of them have no phones. That was basically 25 years ago. None of them have no phones. They're not all walking around doing this and taking a chance on stumbling or running in front of an automobile or whatever. That's how quickly this new world has been dumped upon to us. And of course, you know, your people that you want to praise, pertaining to Bill Gates and all these other smart people that's involved in this technical era that we're in right now, you want to praise them, but in a way, isn't it kind of an oxymoron? Kind of like receiving a gift, and the whole time you thought it was something that we should, you know, applaud and be proud of, but now we're realizing the Achilles heel has come upon us. When it comes to the war front, I'm like everybody else over in Iran. There are certain people that does not have any business in giving them access to a nuclear bomb, because it's pretty obvious that those people are very unstable over there, and it doesn't matter if you give the bomb to one versus the other, that what they're going to wind up doing, they're going to wind up self-mutilating themselves. And while we sit back on our satellites and our TV and monitor all that, or it could breach beyond the perimeters of the Middle East, and the next thing you know, you have a domino effect to where one country is now attacking another country in response towards trying to defend itself or get back at the other country, and you're talking about a self-mutilated event in killing all form of life on the earth. Now, I've come across some information that, to be quite honest with you, I'm more than puzzled about. It actually bothers me to think that we got scientists that was working in Los Alamos, New Mexico recently, that I know for a fact none of those people that's in those laboratories make any less than about $150,000 to $250,000 a year. But because somebody come in there and offer them more money, like China, now they pick up stakes and sell out and go to China and start working for them. Is that not an act of treason? Whenever we have our own people here in the United States that knows how to tweak or knows how to take the atom and basically do the things that they do whenever it comes to nuclear activity, and now somebody overbidded them, you ask whether or not America is for sale? We've lost our integrity. We've literally lost our integrity, especially if people that does do these things, if we don't look upon to them towards a act of betrayal, because now they're going to take that same information and share it with other people that can come back and harm us, that can come back and hurt us. And the same thing with the Middle Easterners, because those people, we've allowed for those people to have all this oil over there, and they got money, and because they got money, because they got the oil, they got power. And those very same people that claim that they're on our side, that want to be our allies, or they claim it to do, are the very same people that will turn and burn us every time, especially if it comes down to where the rubber meets the road of whether or not it's going to be them or us. Them or us. Once more, we have to be clear about these things. We have to be crystal clear about these things in identifying what side that you're actually on. Are you on the right side of history pertaining to standing up for a righteous cause? Or are you only playing games? Are you taking the candle in the middle and playing both ends at the same time? That, my friends, is what's going to destroy America if we don't put our heads together, and if we don't realize how that we've been bamboozled and how that we basically have been betrayed by our own people, beginning with the Reagans and the Bushes, beginning with the media, beginning with Tom Broker and all them other old anchormen going back here 35 years ago. The media that we had trust in. You know, you keep in mind, it ain't been but what, less than 10 years since one of the biggest media agencies basically forfeited and forfeited on, I think, $1 billion lawsuit or something like that. Just like Big Pharma having to crawfish in response towards, instead of helping the American people, it was actually hurting the American people. How many other institutions do we see that it's backfired on us again and again and again? Once more, it's got to do with being true. It's got to do with being clear. It's got to do with being honest. It's got to do with integrity and trust. And whenever you lose that trust, whenever you lose that integrity, you may as well throw everything else out the door. Because everything beyond that point is just a joke. Well, that's what's occurred with the windmill, with the Jesus Christ Jubilee's Windmill Ministries missions, is that they have put out so much false information about the individual that's talking to you right now face to face, that it doesn't matter what type of video that I put out. It doesn't matter how many videos I put out. It doesn't matter the concept of the video that I put out. They have made it up in their minds that this is either somebody that's a madman, somebody that's sick, or somebody that's got the wrong motives in spreading this information out before the people. And I don't think at this point in time it really wouldn't matter what I either could or could not do. The table has been set. Listen to me. The table has been set. Looking at the table, the internationally global table. And now it's pretty apparent that the only way to wake up a generation of the giant being asleep is going to take something extreme. And I hate that. I hate that with every ounce of my being, of my body, that the only way to awaken the American people is something horrible. Well, if 9/11 didn't do it, and it was short-lived, if the things that happened in Waco and Oklahoma and other big events that hit headline media, if COVID didn't awaken us, then I'm like, what's next? Because these was big things that happened in a society's life that we were supposed to have learned our lesson off of, and we just keep going right back to the same old, kind of like a dog returning back to his vomit. It talks about that in the Bible. And whenever a society does that, you have to start wondering maybe we have reached a point of no return. Maybe we have already went over the Rubicon and don't realize it to the degree that we're basically unreformable. We basically can't be saved. No matter how many prophets, no matter how many teachers, no matter how many people that you put on the wall towards being watchmen, or how many spiritual-led people that you put out there, now the people basically are running astray and they're doing their own thing because they've been lied to, because the integrity part has been broken. They have been used, they have been abused, and they've been taken advantage of by their own people. And whenever it reaches that point, my friends, I'm telling you, it's a very, very dangerous state of affairs, to the degree whenever we can't even put full interest in our chief and commander of what he is saying to us, of whether or not it be honestly truthful or half truthful or non-truthful at all. You know, you can corner these people up all you want, and you can make them say something, and most of them have become so witty and so smart here in America that the first thing they want to do is pull a political rabbit out of their hat and say, well, I plead the fifth. I don't have to answer none of your questions. I plead the fifth. Or I plead insanity. This is the point I'm going to make that's in reference to my cousin, that obviously didn't realize the things that he was tapping in pertaining to digital media that we now deal with. That even my son, when he first went to work up in Denver, Colorado, working for one of the biggest concrete companies in the world, Brundage and Bone, he said, Dad, I've reached a point that whenever they try to call me, I won't even answer the phone. I go, well, why is that? That's kind of disrespectful. He said, because I'm tired of them giving me out an order and me being chewed out after I fulfill the quest of the order. They deny that they ever gave it to me to begin with. He said, I'm tired of them lying and being manipulative, and because of it, I want to make sure that whatever that they've said to me, that it's being documented. That way, I can take proof. You know, now you got a paper trail, right? I can take proof and walk into the office and say, wait a minute. You did tell me to do this, this, and this. That's the reason why that I've been so flamboyant in recording and documenting things and doing interviews with people and putting out my life out before the public, is that I wanted it to help to verify or clarify that the things that I'm talking about, preaching and teaching out of the book of life, has not been something that I just promulgated this out of my head or had a vision or a dream or a nightmare one night and decided to get up and do these things. I don't know of nobody that would have went through even a third of what that I've been through and still be able to maintain their focus on the same objective that they started out with going back over 30 plus years ago. And that was the whole concept, because of them trying to make my life so hard, is that they wanted me to steer away from this spiritual quest that the Father had put me on. Or they wanted me to say, oh, I didn't mean it. Or they wanted me to say, well, I just made it up. Or they wanted me, whatever. They wanted to be contrary to the things that I have been telling them for the past 30 plus years. And whenever I put out things like a bloody road ahead, or other things pertaining to electrical disturbances, these are not things that I desire. That I wanted to happen not only to America, but to the world in general. But these are the areas that we're in right now, and if we're not within that realm of reality, especially after somebody tells you, hey, this is what's going to occur. You better start preparing yourself for it. And then it occurs. You know who you got to at that point in time? You know who you got to blame? You, not me. You. The fault falls upon your feet because you didn't listen. You didn't pay attention. You thought somebody was hustling you. You thought somebody was scamming you. You thought somebody was lying to you. You thought that somebody had the wrong intentions or the wrong motives. You thought that they were celebrity hounds, or you thought this or thought that. But you can think whatever you want to think. And I want to continue to maintain the same message. This is my story. I'm sticking to it, pertaining to the miracles that's happened in my life, not to glorify me over, but to glorify my Heavenly Father, pertaining to the fact that if it was not for Him that intervened in all those different things that happened in my life, I wouldn't be sitting here making this movie. I wouldn't be sitting here explaining myself to the public and trying to be as truthful as I know to honestly be. Now, does that mean that I'm beyond recognition, or does that mean that I'm beyond making any type of mistake because my memory may have faded just a little bit? Because basically everything that I talk about, I can prove. I can prove on paper. No, it doesn't mean that I'm perfect. It doesn't mean that I can walk on water. It doesn't mean that I can raise the dead, the same things that Jesus Christ done. But that doesn't hinder me from me trying. Every day, whenever I wake up, it's a brand new exciting day. And it's a brand new day that I can help to do my Heavenly Father's will and not my own. I'm fixing to bury a person by the name of Daryl Plump that basically let me think. I think it was in 1977. I was up at the old theater in Martin, Tennessee, watching a movie by myself, and somebody pecked on my shoulder. And at first I thought, must be a kid, must be a child or something, because you never know whenever a little kid's going to do something. And then it pecked again, and I'm thinking to myself, who are you pecking on my shoulder? What is this? And it happened again. Well, finally, when it happened the third time, I turned around, and there was Daryl looking at me, saying, "Do you get high?" I just got through getting my driver's license permit that my mother signed off on. Daryl had driven his 10 speed up to the theater, and that night started a long, lengthy relationship with him and I. There was a time that I halfway blamed Daryl because of some of my own personal mistakes. Once more, it's a reflection upon not what you're looking at, but how that you're looking at it. The thing about Daryl coming into my life shortly after my second oldest brother had died, realizing that our father was getting worse rather than getting better towards his abusive behavior, not just verbally abuse, but also physical abuse, that if I didn't meet somebody like Daryl that come into my life that basically was my savior, that I would have probably killed my dad, or possibly killed my dad and killed me, because the tension level, the abuse had gotten so degree. At least somebody like Daryl cared. At least Daryl would come to my house. He would listen to how that my dad would rat and rave at us boys, and Daryl actually would go home feeling guilty, because Bob would treat Daryl like a true human being, to where he was abusing us. And I told Daryl one day, I said, well, he knew how far to go with the public, but he didn't know how far to go with his family. A reflection upon what he was taught: the deeper the kin, the closer the kin, the deeper in, pertaining to the things that hurt. Of course, hopefully his motives was towards correcting his family. Hopefully they was in the right area, to the degree that it was based around the sickness that he brought home pertaining to World War II. And that was really one of the leading causes of us being lenient towards not killing him, was the fact that we did look upon to him as him being a sick individual. Especially whenever my second oldest brother did die, and he basically stopped the doctor from getting any of my brother's organs, even though he was an organ donor, because the doctor couldn't guarantee that the organs would be placed back into a white person. It's time that we was honest with one another. It's time that we are sincere with one another, because our lives is at stake here. Not only is it our lives, not only is it our military personal lives, but our children's lives pertaining to their future. Everything is at stake here. The stakes have never been higher than what they are right now in making sure that we halfway try to micromanage our way out of this great storm that we're in. And instead of navigating our way out of the storm, it seems like we continue to go deeper into it, indicating that our officials are still beating the horse on the wrong end. Just like the Afghanistan war, thinking that we're going to go over there and modify, or go over there and rectify, or go over there and basically change the whole concept of those people's thinking. We can't do that on our own. You know, you can bring out every type of pamphlet, every type of whatever scenario. You can go and teach them the basic ethics of right and wrong, but the fact of the matter is they have been indoctrinated for years and years and hundreds of years, and this is what they believe, because that's the way that their grandfather believed, that's the way that their grandmother believed, that's the way that their other parents believed, and all their cousins and everybody else, all their friends. Whenever Donald Trump dove off into the Middle Eastern problem, I really don't think that he thought that through and just exactly what type of a slap that he was fixing to slap, or what type of bite that he was going to attempt to bite in biting those people. And I'm not saying that it wasn't justifiable. I'm just saying it wasn't thought out accurately, or to the truest form, to the degree that now we're seeing this affecting not thousands, but millions, if not billions of people's lives all over the world. Now, we're going to probably, ultimately in the end, get the blame for COVID, even though COVID started on the other side of the pond, even though it come from China. Why? Because that's the way people have been indoctrinated. They need an scapegoat. They need somebody to blame because of their lives falling apart and them no longer being able to survive. They rather blame the other person than to blame themselves. Well, my cousin Jim Boy, especially in the year 2026, if he wasn't adapted already to digital fingerprinting pertaining to leaving a paper trail, either he wasn't in the form of reality to identify the things that he was saying could be recognized by other people, or just didn't care. One or the other. And in the year 2026, you would think by now a grown man, even older than me, would have already been onto that. Especially due to my son telling me what he told me whenever he first started working up in Denver, Colorado for Brundage and Bone, by telling me, Dad, I don't even answer my phone. If they got instructions to tell me, I let them tell me by texting me. That way it leaves, per se, a paper trail, a digital footprint of what was said, who said it, why you said it, when you said it, gives the timestamp, the date, and etc. That's called transparency. That's called covering your tail. Just like old man Billy Graham, and I'm fixing to end, that distrusted the female division so much that he would not counsel a female, either with the door shut or with him alone being in the same room with a female. He would not even get into an elevator. After the door opened up, he realized that there was a female in the elevator. I'll take the next one. He was covering himself. He was protecting himself. I just imagine today, Billy Graham Sr. would use every instrument within his means to be able to do the same thing that I've been doing as far as recording people and recording their conversations, regardless whether digitally or speaking audibly the way that I'm speaking right now. I'm pretty sure that he would sure enough take advantage of the phone system today. I mean, whenever he died, I mean, the smartphone technology had already been introduced to the world. By that time, I'm pretty sure he was, reaching the age that he probably didn't want to relearn himself pertaining to the smartphone technology. But then again, he may have already been adapted to it because he's doing so much office work and stuff. The bottom line is this: the American people are valued in the form of our sovereignty off of truths, off of, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? We deserve that from our leadership. Whenever we do not get that from our leadership, then it questions at bear of the authenticity or the integrity of, well, what do we got here? The blind leading the blind? What we got here? The left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing? I mean, are we just in this thing just kind of middle of like a transit or something? My friends, we're going to have to awaken, and we're going to have to really, really sharpen the pencil, per se, as my grandmother used to always tell us, in making sure that we cross all our T's and we dot all our I's, because I'm telling you right now, the stakes could never be higher than where we are right now. God bless America. God bless our devoted troops. And I feel so sorry for those that have been injured or those that had to pay the ultimate sacrifice off of this ordeal that's happening right now over in the Middle East. I just pray to God that it will be handled properly. I pray to God that our people, our leadership, will know the right decisions to make and how to make them. But most of all, I pray that they'll be honest with us about it. God bless, and good luck to all of us. Heaven help us all. And shalom. May peace be with you.